Hello, everyone. I am Victor Heddenberg. I'm the membership director at the Association of MBAs and the Business Graduates Association. Today, with me on another podcast, I'm very excited to announce that we have Professor Michael Wade with us. Michael Wade is a professor of strategy and digital at IMD Business School in Lausanne, Switzerland, one of the world's leading business schools. So Michael, welcome onto the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Victor. I'm very happy to be here.
Very good to have you. Michael, before we kind of deep dive into our topic today, which will be the combination of AI and sustainability, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what really got you into this topic in the first place?
Yeah, so I'm a faculty member in a business school. I guess many of your listeners will have a lot of experience with business schools, and IMD is a little bit different than a traditional business school. We do have an MBA program. We have an executive MBA program. We're very proud of both of these programs, but the majority of our business is in executive education. So I spend a lot of my time traveling around the world. And at the moment, it may look like I'm in Switzerland, which is where I'm based, but I'm actually in northern Thailand. Working with executives on challenges that they are facing in their work. So that's what I do most of the time. I also at IMD run a research center that we have here, which is focused on digital and AI transformation. So we have a small team of people trying to, kind of get our heads around all the changes that are happening and what they mean and how they impact organizations in terms of opportunities or threats. Now, I haven't always been an academic. I have worked at IMD for 15 years, so I guess it's quite a long time. But I was in the workforce. I was an entrepreneur. I was a consultant before that. So I came to academia a little bit later.
Okay, very, very an exciting journey, a very global career, of course. And the AI sustainability question, obviously AI has become something that it's existed for a long time, but let's say it didn't come out to the masses until about 3-4 years ago, especially with the ChatGPT model. So when did your interest actually come and stem from when it comes to the AI aspect?
Well, I've been interested in digital for a long time. In the 1990s, I had online businesses that I ran, which was, relatively early in the age of sort of the World Wide Web. So I was very interested even from then. And at that point, AI was already mature. I mean, AI, there's going to be very, very few of your listeners that are going to be older than AI. AI has been around for a very, very long time, and it's gone through, its ups and downs and so forth. But I think it all changed. Of course, most people associate it with November 2022 when ChatGPT was released. But really, the big change happened in 2018. Because in 2018, three things happened all around the same time. First was we started to have these massive data sets. And all the models that we use have behind them massive data sets. And we never had data sets this size before. Because, even today in 2025, the models will get most of their answers from their own data sets, not the internet. The second thing was, the ability of the processing power to catch up with the computational intensity that these models require. So suddenly, the move from CPUs to GPUs happened, and we had the ability to kind of parallel process all this data. And the third thing was the transformer algorithm was also identified and built around that time. So all those things kind of happened at the same time, and then there was a lot of development that most people didn't notice behind the scenes, and then kind of came to the fore when ChatGPT was released by OpenAI, and since then it's just gone like crazy. We've all seen it.
Yeah, and it seems it's just building on from day to day. It's just getting better. So I guess the worst AI will be is today, because tomorrow it's going to be an even more powerful model with an even bigger data set. Why don't we then switch this into what you've been looking at, which is the combination of sustainability and AI. First of all, why look at the two together? Why is that so important?
Well, we talk about AI as being, a mega trend, which it has been. It's been over the last 10 years, one of the most influential, impactful trends that are impacting our personal as well as our professional lives. Not only AI, digital, all the tools. I mean, it's really omnipresent. But there's this kind of parallel mega trend, and that's around sustainability and ethics, which has also been building and influencing us in many different ways. And interestingly enough, these two mega trends have had relatively few intersection points. I mean, you think about, technology, digital, and AI, it's bits and bytes, it's kind of the ephemeral world, whereas sustainability is very much in the physical world. It's about recycling, it's about greenhouse gases, it's about trees, it's about waste, it's about all that stuff. So kind of they didn't have a lot of natural intersections, and they were dealt with largely by different people. Even within organizations, whereas my focus is organizations, you'd have sustainability teams, you'd have digital and AI teams. These are two different teams. They didn't work together. They didn't interact very much. They had different mindsets. They reported to different people. They had different KPIs. They really had very little to do with each other. And I think it's just interesting and also inevitable that these two megatrends are going to mix and they are going to collide. And I was interested in trying to think about what happens. What does that look like? How can organizations prepare for this? And how can organizations leverage the power of one to improve the other, whether it's AI improving sustainability or sustainability improving AI? Both can happen.
So if we take that a step further, then, because obviously now we're looking at what's happening in the U.S. There seems to be almost the U.S. sort of approach to this seems to be almost like a zero-sum game. You do one or the other, and the focus now obviously is on growth. They're cutting a lot of the sustainability or ESG focus that was there previously. Is that necessary to grow in this area? Or is the approach that we're seeing in Europe, which is perhaps a little bit more cautious to AI, more focused on sustainability, is that a better approach, or are we both on the extremes and we need to find something in the middle?
I mean, I have my opinion on this, and everybody's entitled to their own opinions. But I mean, for me, I think a balanced approach makes a whole lot more sense. I mean, I'm a big proponent of leveraging the power of AI, but not indiscriminately. I think it should be leveraged in a way that is, not too harmful, not overly harmful to the planet. That is done in an ethical way, a careful way, a safe and secure way. I mean, AI today is an incredibly powerful technology. As your listeners know, I mean, if you're a recent graduate of an MBA program or you're in a program, you are using AI every single day. And you can see the power of this technology to transform what you do and how you do it. So it's incredibly powerful. And yet there are very, very few checks and balances out there, that you might expect with a powerful, technology as powerful as this. If you look at other powerful technologies like nuclear, for example, I mean, there's so many checks and balances out there, right? To make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, non-proliferation, keeping track of how it's being used and where it's being used and what it's being used for. There is very, very little oversight and governance around AI. And as you say, some parts of the world, including the current administration in the US, so it's not to say that everybody feels this way, but the current administration is focused very much on growth and acceleration and kind of, we'll worry about the other stuff later. And I'm not just talking here about sustainability, but other safety concerns that come with this technology. It's go, 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 because it's a competitive question. If we don't do it, someone else will do it and we'll fall behind. So this is the kind of, as you mentioned, a zero-sum game approach, which which is one way to look at it. And I prefer to look at it in the way that, we can all benefit. If somebody wins, it doesn't mean that somebody else has to lose. We can all win. But to do that, we have to put some guardrails and checks and balances on this technology. We just have to.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Then you mentioned also, and this is something that popped into my head while you were talking about this, the sustainability part seems to be something that you cannot discount from the equation, because the amount of energy that's required each time we query the AI systems for anything, it seems almost infinite amount of power. I know it's not like that, but it's a lot of energy that's required. And these enormous data centers that are being built, that it's not just the data center, but it's all the cooling that's required, that requires energy, of course. How is this going to impact the environment? Because that seems to be something secondary almost, that maybe we're not thinking so much of right now, but how much of an impact could it have on the environment and our energy requirements?
Well, a massive impact. Clearly, as you said, these big data centers. So we talked about two things before. Three things, right? We talked about the size of the data sets. We talked about the processing power required, right? And we talked about the algorithms. Now, all of those require a massive amount of energy, electricity, and electricity creates heat, and heat needs to be cooled, so that uses water. So there's a massive environmental impact. I think an interesting question to ask is, when we look at AI, what is the overall impact on society? Is it positive? Is it neutral? Or is it negative? And I think immediately it's easy to jump to the conclusion that it's negative because there are so many direct negative impacts, right? As you talked about, the energy requirements, the heat that's created, which adds to global warming, the water that needs to be cooled. So there are direct impacts that are negative, and those need to be reduced. There's no question that all the big, hyperscalers and AI companies, have a duty to reduce the direct impact they're having on the environment. But you could also look at it a different way, which is to look at what are these systems and tools doing, and are they replacing things done in other ways that could be less impactful? So, for example, we did some analysis looking at making what it takes to make a 1-hour TV show. And we looked at what it makes to make a 1-hour TV show using generative AI. And then we looked at the same thing using the traditional way. Now, using generative AI, we considered, you need at least 30 frames a second of high quality images. So that's a lot of images that need to be generated, right? So it's a ton of energy that you need. But then you look at it the traditional way. You need actors that are wearing clothes that need to eat. You need to put them in buildings where you need to be heated or cooled. You need, lighting people and cameras, and you need to do post-production. And when you add up all of that, actually doing it with AI is much less directly negatively impactful to the environment than doing it the traditional way. So if you're replacing something that's quite impactful with AI, which is also impactful but much less, it's actually a positive impact. So I think that the overall picture is actually quite complex. There's two things that need to happen, right? The AI industry and the digital sector needs to reduce its impact, but we also need to consider the fact that other things are not being done now that, that actually improving the impact overall.
That's really interesting. So when we talk about this, then how does it impact? And we'll go into a little bit more of the strategy shortly of how many of our listeners can use AI, as well as more of a sustainability focus. But how does it impact people who are used to working with more of these, using the cameras and setting up the sets and all of that? I mean, we're talking, potentially the ethics part of it is that a lot of people would lose their job as a result of using generative AI. And I know there's also been the argument from some people who say, well, look, you lose the creative elements because now all of a sudden everything is left to a machine, and that might not be as creative as we think. And maybe it is, maybe it's not. But still, that's the argument being put forward.
Yeah, I mean these models are just getting better and better and better, and the original kind of use case was they can make you more efficient, they can make you more productive, they can save you time. But that now we can see that they can also improve the quality of what you do. So it's not just in making you more efficient and productive, it's actually making you better by improving the quality. And now we're seeing they can also be creative. So creativity, which used to be sort of, the one place where humans can never be replaced, is coming under question now. So these models, they can help you to be more efficient, they can help you to have better quality, they can help you to be more creative, or they can do it without you. And so will there be impacts on employment? Almost certainly. Which way is it going to go? It's hard to say. It's hard to say. But I would say that it's tricky if you're a student today or if you're a recent graduate, because you look at the headlines and the headlines are saying, we're not hiring as many young people, we're replacing junior people because AI can do their jobs, or contribute. We don't need to hire 10, we hire 3, and then supplement with AI. I think that's all happening. I think that's all true. Yeah. So it is a tricky one, but I would caution companies from doing this too much, because I think you actually want young people, because those young people, who's going to replace the older people, right? You need young people who have the ability to learn the business, to learn the ropes, to then become better. And also it's the young people who are most comfortable with the technology, that know how to leverage the power of this technology, not to just do basic things. Most people are using Copilot and these other tools to, summarize documents, write emails, just basic stuff, which is not really leveraging the true power of what these technologies can do. And young people are much more sophisticated. So I would caution any company from, not looking at hiring young people. But having said that, Victor, there is no doubt that there is going to be massive impacts on it. I can't tell you if it's going to be a replacement, an augmentation. I mean, what I would hope is that the pie gets bigger. So the employment pie gets bigger, meaning that even if AI has a substituting effect, so jobs are being lost to AI, AI is taking a bigger proportion of the pie, so like this to this. If the pie itself is bigger, it doesn't matter. There's still more jobs for people. So that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, it's somewhat similar to what people were saying with the Industrial Revolution, that the machines would take over all the jobs that from the farmers and so forth. And then actually what it did was more jobs were actually created in entirely new industries that didn't exist before. So, and maybe that's the potential here. And I suppose the difficulty now is that we're in this part where we don't see what's actually going to look like. We're in this phase at the moment in the middle. Yeah. I was reading in the Financial Times actually just last week that there were people, and I never thought this would happen, there were people who had studied programming at various universities, top schools like Purdue University, who cannot find jobs now because companies like Microsoft are saying, well, we just need a couple of people to do the code, and then we just have the AI systems create what we need. Actually, the programmers are becoming more like a symphony conductor almost, who decides, okay, this is what we need. Now you write the code, AI system, and they generate that, and they know how things should look, but they don't need the actual coders. So it's an interesting time. It's sad also, of course, that some people put in so much time towards this, only to realize that by the time they've graduated, that job no longer exists, or it exists, but in very small numbers.
And it's happening so quickly, right? I would say 3 years ago, you would give the advice to somebody, say, what should I be when I grow up? To be a coder, right? To learn to code, and you'll always be fine. You'll always have a job. 3 years ago, that would be good advice. That is not good advice today for the reason you suggest. I mean, being a coder is not good. I mean, all the big digital giants are cutting coders. I mean, massively. And it is tricky. I mean, you mentioned the Industrial Revolution, and that's certainly the case. That replaced physical labor with sort of intellectual capabilities, so knowledge work. And so we built this massive ecosystem of knowledge workers. And that is now being slowly taken over by cognitive machines like white collar robots, right? But maybe you could say that's okay because we have our creativity, right? That's going to save us. But now these models are also being creative. So, it's not clear to me where this next wave of jobs is going to come from. Certainly, it's not going to be physical. It's probably not going to be cognitive. It's probably not going to be creative. So what else? How many dog walkers how many hairstylists, how many ballerinas do we need, right? So I can't really predict. All I can tell you is that we figured it out in the past. We've always managed to figure it out, but it's not clear to me how we're going to figure it out this time, unless we can increase the size of the pie. So we can just, using AI, just do a whole lot more stuff than we do today. Same stuff, just a whole lot more of it.
Yeah, I think that's a big question mark at the moment. We'll see how it all pans out. But if we take this now into kind of the boardroom, or in the scenario of many of our students or grads who, they are leading a team at a global or maybe even a domestic company, they're seeing all these changes taking place. What would you recommend, maybe 2 or 3 things for them to look at when it comes to using AI? And I suppose it doesn't just have to be generative AI. This is a very small component of it, of course. But what would some of your recommendations be, especially for those who've now finished, say, an MBA program, they're back at work, maybe in a higher, more decision-making position? What should they be looking at for the next couple of years?
Well, for sure, don't ignore it. It is going to be a big part of everyone's future. So become comfortable with it, become, more than just aware, understand its strengths and weaknesses, invest the time necessary to see the strengths and limitations. It's at a jagged edge. So there are some things that are amazing, but other things that are really disappointing. Figure out what that is. Learn how to leverage it. But I would say that's just at the individual level. There's this study that came out very, very recently from MIT, and it literally moved markets, right? And the conclusion was of this study that 90% of organizations have zero impact on profit from generative AI. 95%, zero impact on performance. And that came out, and then the next day, the stock price of Nvidia dropped, and Palantir and others all dropped. And the reason was the classic reasons, right? It's change management in there. It's not done well. It's people resisting. It's all the kind of people stuff. So I think for the MBAs that are graduating, you become an organizational expert. So it's not about the technology. You definitely become familiar with the technology, but have a deep understanding of how it integrates into workflows, into processes, how to convince people to use it, to leverage it, to not be scared of it, how to link it to culture so you can embrace new technology, this type of thing. The organizations that are going to be successful, the ones that can implement and integrate this technology into their workflows, not the ones that invest the most. And another thing in that paper, which was hidden, it really didn't get a lot of press, but I think is more interesting, is that 40% of companies that they surveyed, actually leveraged Gen AI to a significant degree, had, subscriptions and so forth. But 90% of employees were using it, which means lots of employees are using it in a non-compliant way. They're using it anyway. So the people are using it. Why are they using it? Because the benefits are just so obvious to them. It just makes them do their jobs better. But the trick is to leverage those technologies and those improvements at the organization level. So MBA students that can do that can take these technologies and somehow help organizations to leverage the power to improve performance. That is a skill set that will always be in demand.
That's really interesting, because I was just in Chile, and I was talking to one of the business schools there, and a little bit about what their alumni were up to. And what was interesting was their students who had graduated and worked in positions. It was just like that in their companies. All the employees were using AI, but as a whole company, there wasn't even a strategy behind. But apparently, and this is what I was told, it was because of the fact that many are afraid that if the company finds out how much they're relying on the technology, that they could be very easily replaced. So they're keeping it. There's almost this fear of letting anyone know. And is that a justified fear, you think, or is this just how the new reality will work, where we all use AI, and it's more about how we prompt, I guess, to do what we want?
I mean, that happens, and it's a good example of how organizations are mismanaging AI, right? If they're either blocking it or hiding it, and or they've got culture where an employee is afraid to admit to using AI. This is something that is a problem way beyond technology, right? Kind of hiding things. And I think, why does this happen? Why do people hide the use of AI? I think there's, one of the reasons is the one you mentioned, that if people see how productive it's making them, they may feel they lose their jobs, or they might feel like, let's say, you can save a day a week using generative AI because it makes you more productive. They're worried that, if that gets out, they'll just get given an extra day of work. They just get given extra work. So actually, they're not benefiting directly from the technology. It's the organization and that's happened throughout history with technology innovations. There's been a lot of technology that's made society more productive, but individuals, look at your day. Do you feel like, with the power of AI has made you any less busy? Are you in any fewer meetings? Do you have fewer responsibilities? Do you feel like you got more free time? So I think that's legitimate fear, and its organizations need to address that to help their employees understand that they shouldn't hide the fact that you're doing better work and you're more productive.
So maybe something for our listeners to consider now when some of them go back to their job is to maybe consider how they can integrate some sort of an AI policy or framework within their organizations, because that seems to be what's really missing. And maybe that can also prompt a little bit of a discussion as to, that using AI will not necessarily make anyone lose their job. But I do agree with you on one thing here, Michael, is that definitely with the use of AI, it feels like everything's actually sped up, accelerated. Things are happening a lot quicker than they did before. Doesn't necessarily make you feel like you're less busy. If anything, things are moving so quickly that it feels you're more busy, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm definitely more productive than I used to be, and I'm as busy as I used to be, or maybe more busy, but I'm getting a heck of a lot more done. So for me, it's great. I really appreciate the power of this technology, not just to make me more efficient, but also to improve the quality of the work that I do, the breadth of the work that I do. So, for me, it's been great. I've got, two books published this year. I don't usually publish multiple books in 1 year, and of course, I'm having the benefit of generative AI, but the way I use it, the way I think about how I use it is like I have an electric bike, right? And often I go to work on this electric bike. I live about 30 kilometers from where I work. So it's not that close, but it's not super far either. But it's a long way to go on a normal bike. But the electric bike, it's still me pedaling. It's me, I'm doing the work, but I just go further and I go faster. And that's exactly how I see generative AI. It's still me, it's my ideas, it's my words, it's my thoughts. I'm just getting them down a lot faster than I used to before. So for me, I think it's a great amplifier. And I think it's probably the way it could be for most people.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you then say, because it's changing so quickly, it's rapidly evolving, probably new tools that will be available in just the next 6 months. It seems to me, at least when I've spoken to many of the students and grads, that they have a problem keeping up with what's happening with the technology. So, you do your MBA, maybe now a lot of MBAs are starting to integrate this into the curriculum, which, is really great. But by the time you graduate, many of the things will be outdated already. So what do you do? How do you keep, what sources should you look at? How do you keep yourself, abreast of what's happening with these new technologies? And should they be, should universities consider lifelong learning modules where you keep coming back every year to, see what's happening with the recent models and what's now available? And what would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, everybody's got to be taking a lifelong learning approach. The old days where the first quarter of your life is the learning phase, and then the two middle quarters are the doing phase, and then there's the do nothing phase right at the end. I think that's gone. I mean, we have to continually learn and develop, and it never stops. Learning never stops, and the pace of change and the unpredictability of change is making that even more important. So it's staying abreast. However, you do that, whether you do it through news clipping, which you can just automatically. I mean, I have ChatGPT create a summary of news every week, right? On things. I keep track of things, certain people I follow that I find provide good insights, not too many, right? Because you don't want to be overloaded. There's all kinds of WhatsApp groups I'm involved in, and Reddit and LinkedIn, and all this stuff, keeping track of things that are going on. I would also suggest that everybody invest in at least one paid version of the frontier model. So you pick, basically it's the big three at the moment, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. Pick one. And they're all pretty similar. I mean, they have different strengths and weaknesses, but pick one and just pay the $20 or 20 euros or whatever it is a month. Just do it, because you will get an incredibly powerful tool in your hand. You'll get the latest models, and they're changing all the time. So, just last week, ChatGPT started offering agent mode, which is a whole new set of capabilities. Gemini has just offered video, which is amazing, and image manipulation tools, editing tools. Before, you could create images, but if you wanted to change that image, it just recreates the whole image from scratch. It's very difficult to have constant characters. Now you can have that. So it's changing very, very quickly. If you have a subscription to one of these models, you get the latest. And I think you should do that. And the best way to learn about these models is to use them. Invest. Probably at the beginning, if you don't have a lot of experience with these models, you probably need 10 hours to play with them. And then maybe a couple hours a week just to kind of update yourself, figure out what the latest thing is. So you do need, lifelong learning means you need to invest in your learning. And that also means time. So putting aside some time every week to sort of figure out what the latest and greatest is with these models is well invested time. You will get a return on that investment for sure.
That's actually a really good advice, and purchasing at least one of those, paying the subscription fee to just have the most up-to-date software as well, definitely makes a lot of sense. So I hope actually a lot of companies will sort of sponsor that sort of software for their employees. I know a lot of them still don't, but that could be maybe one of the first steps that a lot of companies take in terms of having an official policy on this. What about some of the risks, though? I know, your book and so forth is more about the sustainability aspect, but I can't help but ask, as these editing tools get better, as it's easier to come across as let's say someone is sending out emails there that make it look like it's coming from you and your company, to the point where almost soon enough, maybe it's already happened, where you can have a video and you think you're talking to the actual person. What sort of future could that create? And I suppose that would leads us into a whole cybersecurity discussion, which we of course don't need to have today. But what are some things maybe for a lot of our listeners to be aware of and to be careful of?
Yeah, so there's a lot of risks, and any powerful technology is going to have amazing positive aspects, but it's going to bring with it some concerning and some worrying aspects as well. Earlier this year, I released a book called Gain. So gain, as in the power of AI. AI is in gain, GAIN, and so you can gain a lot, but you can also lose a lot. And so we have a couple of chapters in there about the risks that come with generative AI, and they are significant, and you have to be aware of those. And so, if you are concerned about accuracy, it's really important that what you do is accurate. Then be careful with these tools because they hallucinate, and they will always hallucinate. It's really part of the nature of the algorithms. They'll always hallucinate. So you have to be aware of that. If you need repeatability, be careful because you will not get the same answer with the same prompt. It's not like traditional narrow AI in that respect. If you're concerned about sustainability, is the focus of our twin transformation book, then be careful with these tools because they are not designed to be kind to the environment. So yes, absolutely leverage the power of these tools for increased performance, but be aware that there's a downside and a dark side. And then, of course, the cybersecurity one is, as you mentioned, the ability of these. I mean, I'm not particularly, technology savvy, and I'm not a technology expert, but in a very few minutes, I could take a picture of you. I could take a screenshot of you right now. I could take a sample of your voice, and there's been enough of your voice in this podcast. It's enough. I could animate that very, very easily, and I could have you say pretty much anything I want you to say in video format using publicly available tools, or tools that cost me almost nothing, and that exists today. So for sure, I'm advising boards and management teams to have a safe word. It sounds ridiculous, like going back to the old family safe word. You need a safe word. To be absolutely sure that you're really talking to the person that you think you're talking to. And so I think we are looking at a future where we need to be much, much more careful about interactions and how we use this technology. And, trust, even in video calls, is not for sure. Text, forget about it. You can be spoofed almost perfectly. Audio is getting so much better, and video is the next.
Actually, it's funny you say that, Michael. One of my colleagues pulled a prank on me and took a video sample, audio sample as well from a presentation I did a few months ago. And what was really interesting about in that clip is seemed so real, except the topic was absurd because I was talking about moving to Mongolia and living the life of a nomad. But it sounded as if it came from me, and the lip sync was perfect. So that, yes, the technology exists there. I've seen it for myself. It is scary how good it is, but it's there. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of scammers out there. And I think maybe, going back to how when we started the podcast, to the future of jobs and so forth and what they're going to look like. I mean, it feels almost as if that face-to-face component is going to get more and more important as time goes on. Because that trust element might erode as a result of the AI always having to double check, is this real, is this not real? Maybe that face-to-face component is what's going to be the most important element going forward. What do you think?
We're social animals at root. We're social animals, so we're always going to want that kind of face-to-face, that human contact. Now, these models are getting much, much better. I mean, what they do is essentially look for patterns in data and then they recreate those patterns in new contexts. So, the pattern of a conversation can be spoofed. So these models are getting much better, and they're getting very, very convincing. We're using them at IMD, in a compliant way, in a creative way, as for coaching, right? And for evaluating coaching interactions and stuff like that. So that's also coming, but for sure, we're always going to need that sort of human contact. So we're not done for just yet, thankfully. We still have, I think
Yeah.
humans still have a future.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are too. Um, Before we just kind of wrap everything up, obviously we haven't focused as much on sustainability, but I think it's important to touch at least a bit on it because, as I mentioned, many of the MBA graduates, they're going back into work. They're responsible probably for some business processes, maybe for entire teams and so forth. A lot of companies will have a sustainability officer. And there's this, I suppose, maybe potentially a clash of ideas of how much AI should be used. Because from a sustainability point of view, as you mentioned just earlier, a lot of energy, it can be used for bad purposes as well. It kind of goes sometimes against a company that's trying to have a net zero strategy where it's very clearly this is helping in terms of carbon emissions. So what would you say to some of these people who are now going to work together with sustainability officers? What should that collaboration even look like?
Yeah, I mean, despite the headlines, companies are still focused on sustainability. We used to talk about greenwashing. It's almost the opposite right now. They're doing sustainability stuff, but they're quiet about it. But this latest book that we wrote, I mean, it's a very different book than many of my other books, in that we wrote it as a novel. So I mentioned this other book, Gain, earlier. I mean, that's a fairly traditional book explaining about generative AI and the benefits and the costs and the challenges and how to leverage it for increased performance. I mean, it's very much a business book. But this more recent book, Twin Transformation, is sort of it's written from the perspective of two executives in a company. One executive is leading the sustainability business, the other is leading the AI side, and they're being forced to work together. And as I mentioned right at the beginning of this podcast, this rarely happens, right? These two groups, they very rarely interact. They may meet only at the CEO because they're going up through completely like, so you don't get sustainability programs really leveraged in the power of technology, and you don't get technology really thinking too much about sustainability, and that's a shame. So in this particular, the way we set up the book, basically it's a traditional company that's going through some hard times, and they see the future as technology enabled and also sustainable. So they hire these two new executives, and these two new executives have to work together. And it's kind of an interesting, they face all kinds of challenges, cultural challenges, because they come from very, very different mindsets, and the teams, they have to start doing things together. But also the rest of the organization is super skeptical, which is also the case. They have all kinds of resistance from other functions and operations and sales and finance. They just don't get it. Why is this happening? What does it look like? And so they have to overcome all these challenges, and these challenges are based on challenges that we see every day in companies that we work with. And so it's kind of it's written as a narrative, it's written as a novel, and how they overcome these challenges and what happens, at the end when they do manage to build synergies between these groups, and how this can be so powerful. So it's a fun read. I mean, it was fun to write because it's very, very different than what we normally do. But I think it's also fun to read because when people read it, they'll recognize some of these challenges in their own careers that they faced. So I don't think it's going away. AI is certainly not going away, but sustainability is not going away either. And if these two groups can work together, I think we're going to see much greater sustainability impacts and benefits, but also, much kinder, safer, less, dirty technology as well. And both of those things are good for companies, and they're good for the planet.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, we can't forget that, green energy is going to be an important component of providing the energy and and let's say the infrastructure for
Of course.
all of these data centers. I can't remember which company it was I was listening to the other day, but they were focusing on solar. I think it was in Arizona, and that
Yeah.
solar is I mean, you think about how solar technology worked, 10, 15 years ago, and how much better the panels are today. And they are now providing energy to many of those data centers. So I suppose, yes, it's definitely so that we need both to work together than against each other. And having executives who are aware of this
Yeah.
is going to be important. So what we will do, Michael, is we will put the twin transformation for all the listeners on our platform. So if anyone is ever interested in reading the book, they can get access to it right away and read through it, and hopefully should be a fun one for them and how they can compare with their own career trajectories. Um, okay, very good, Michael. So if I had to ask you then to summarize everything, maybe three things that you definitely want to tell the audience about what we discussed today that they should take into account when we finish this podcast. What would those three things be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I mean AI, this is different. I think, I've seen a lot of waves of technology come and go, and everybody's super excited. It's going to change the world. Blockchain, it's going to change the world. Well, it didn't, right? I mean, in certain segments, it had an impact, but they're very, very niche. Metaverses, Web3, NFTs, 3D printing, I could go on. There are so many of these. And I think the difference here is that this is a multi-purpose technology. So unlike traditional AI, which is very narrow, this is not narrow. So it can be used to amplify so many different things. So I would say first thing, lean in to generative AI. This is going to be around for a very, very long time, and it's going to massively impact how we live and work. So definitely go all in on that. Um, I think sustainability too. I mean, we are heating the planet, and the planet is responding, and it will continue to respond. We have to be aware of that. So, whatever we can do to be kind to the planet, it will be kinder to us in return. And that's why I think it's so important to think of these two mega trends not separately, but put together. But fundamentally, I would say to close, I'm an optimist. I think we're going to be fine. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but I think it's going to be fine. And so, MBAs and young graduates today, fundamentally, the skills that you learn when it comes to managing people, processes, structure, incentives, culture, those are going to be around forever. So I'd say, lean in to those as well. So understand the technology, but be really strong on the soft side, because that's where the real, that's where the growth is going to happen. It's not about becoming an expert in something very narrow, because in the future AI is going to be more knowledgeable than you. But it's the revenge of the generalists, because we're going to need more generalists in the future, people who understand, culture, how people work, and optimize processes and improve systems. I mean, those are the skills that are going to be in demand in the future, not being deep subject matter experts.
And that's a really great way to end this episode on. I think it's a lot of hope in there. Obviously, we have to use the technology, but also not forget the fundamental part that we are a social animal. That those social elements will always be important. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. Real pleasure to do this podcast with you. And then, of course, for everyone listening, stay tuned for the next podcast, which we will announce in a couple of weeks. And looking forward to seeing you there. Bye-bye.